Good morning, everybody. It's Dr. Antonio live again for a weekly talk. And it's part two of the discussion we had last week on sleep. And I wonder if you guys have thought about anything based on what I mentioned last week. And I kind of wanted to recap what I mentioned last week and then go a little bit deeper today as far as other concepts around sleep. So last week I had mentioned how there's a lot of different factors that contribute towards sleeping at nighttime. And I read it as a concept called svabhava, which refers to a natural inclination to things. And so when there's a natural inclination in the evening to go to sleep, then it's understood that following that natural inclination will increase a certain level of optimal health. Because if you're listening to your body's natural urges, and one of them being sleep, then it brings us better connected to health because we're just honoring the body. We're just listening to the body. We're paying attention to the body's cues. And so what's important to consider is that when you first notice at the end of the day that you're starting to feel a little tired, generally it happens around 8 o'clock, at least an hour or two after dinner. And so when that first cue starts, it's important to allow ourselves to just gradually make our way to bed, not increase the amount of nighttime activities with emails or text messages or stimulating conversations or, watching intense movies or, doing work or anything like that. Because we're utilizing certain energies that are designed to direct us to sleep for stimulating activities. So we're going between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic nervous system activities. And so nighttime, sleep time, is encouraging of the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's what we want because really to get optimal sleep, we want to contribute towards those factors that will produce more positive outcomes towards health. And sleep is essential, like I mentioned last week. And it has a domino effect. So improper sleep will affect what you feel like the next day. And you can start determining what that looks like when you first wake up in the morning after having stayed out or stayed up late. And depending on what time you wake up as well, that has another influence on health and vitality. And so preparing ourselves in honor of the day cycles, and this also applies to people that are in a general routine of daytime activity, nighttime rest. This doesn't apply for the most part to people that are essential workers that might need to be up at night. That fireman that has to answer that call at 2 o'clock in the morning. You want him to come and answer the fire and deal with the fire versus say, well, I have to get my rest. Or a surgeon that has to do surgery at 1 o'clock in the morning. You'd want that surgeon to be there. So certain people will be sacrificing certain aspects of health because of certain duties that they have within the realm of what they're living their life as. And so, there are other modifications to adjust to that in order to really still support those individuals. But anyway, this conversation, this sharing with you is more about people that have a regular schedule of waking up and doing things during the daytime and resting and sleeping at nighttime. And so it's really about refining what that looks like because our health is wealth. And without our health, then, over long term, we're paying to try to get healthy based on the fact that we're making certain choices that contribute towards ill health. And so Ayurveda is very strong about understanding, the various factors that support health and create ill health. And we want to optimize health as much as possible. You know, so sleep is essential. It's a important key. It's an important pillar in Ayurveda towards health. And so making sure that when you find that first cue and you're like, oh, I kind of feel a little tired, not to say, okay, I'm going to engage in activities or stay up late or doing things like this, because you're sacrificing your health. You're sacrificing the physiology because the physiology is gearing towards the direction of preparation and rectification of the day's activities so that in the next morning it's sort of packaged and delivers through the excretory routes like urine, feces, and sweat. We wake up in the morning and we're releasing things from yesterday. We're letting go of the past, which is kind of really cool to consider. That when we wake up in the morning, we're letting go of yesterday's stuff by peeing it out, pooping it out, sweating it out, and expectorating it out, releasing it from the mouth, cleaning the oral cavity, the anal cavity gets cleaned out essentially. And so we're letting go of yesterday's stuff. And so when we're staying up later, we're compromising the body's capacity to do what it's needing to do to prepare you for the next day, which, we can consider the future. And so what we do today will affect us tomorrow. And then when we are in the tomorrow, we look and think, well, what am I feeling today? As if tomorrow becomes today, which is more the present moment. What did I do yesterday that contributed to what I'm feeling like today? And this is what Ayurveda is very strongly about. Understanding this cause and effect relationship. I know in many of my talks I mentioned Karya Karana, which is an Ayurvedic concept of cause and effect. There's so much of that. And so what Ayurveda does, it's designed to create an awareness between our relationship to our lives and our external environment and observing our internal environments and see where the homeostasis or lack of equilibrium exists. And, health is really based on choice. And it really depends on our discipline, our dedication, our focus, our willingness, and to weigh it out. We have to make a choice. Like, how badly do I want better health if I have to sacrifice going to bed when I start to feel naturally inclined to go to bed? And then, when we start listening to these cues, we improve the quality of health. We improve our quality of relationship to ourselves because now we're listening to ourselves and we're slowing down. We're coming out of the mind activities and overactivities and understanding, oh, there's something real happening. My body is directing me not that way. And we're creating this unison relationship between body and mind. So then waking up the next morning also occurs naturally, which is svabhava for the next day. So it is understood in Ayurveda that when we first wake up in the morning, regardless of whatever time that is, that's the time to wake up. And it's, again, in the normal context of things, when a person's more in homeostasis versus someone's up late and really stressed before they go to bed and activated before they go to bed, and they were watching TV so late at night and then they wake up. These are all subtle impressions that incur harm on the nervous system and accumulate in our nervous system. So that is a byproduct of when we wake up in the middle of the night. There's something that we didn't let go of from the previous day or days or however long, and it's sitting in our system trying to act as a discharge. And so sometimes those erratic sleep patterns happen because of that. It's like, what are we thinking before bed? What are we doing before bed? What are our activities? We're watching TV. That's usually what happens. It's like we're watching something or we're listening to something or engaging in something stimulating or overstimulating during the time when we're supposed to rest. And so then that influences the sleep quality during the middle of the night. There are certain exceptions to the rule. For instance, if you're a baby and you have erratic sleep schedules, you can slowly try to navigate some of that with the more mindfulness, and that kind of couples with what the parents are doing as their own daily routine practices. But that's a whole other concept and topic around pregnancy, postnatal, prenatal, etc. And also senior citizens, where they don't necessarily have to have the same quality of sleep they had when they were in their 20s. So, but what is still practical, what is still a universal concept is that when you start to feel that sense of tiredness in the evening, to start following that in a direction that it's leading you appropriately. And then trusting the body's wisdom that when it wakes up, that's the time to wake up. Not wake up and go back to sleep. Wake up and start doing things that are going to be productive and conducive to the day. And it's understood in Ayurveda that creativity, inspiration, things like that, productivity, efficiency happens in the earlier part of the day and sets the tone for the day versus exhausting certain body's functions and resources, physiological processes in the evening time to try to get that thing met, that deadline met, or that report done, or that study done, or like all these things, because we're producing here, but we're compromising here. And so at some point, the body's going to win. Like, really, the body takes us down. When we don't really listen to the symptoms enough, when they start to, in subtle ways, they accumulate enough to something much bigger that really grabs our attention and is the gravity. And it's usually in those instances, which is based on a case-by-case basis, that people say, oh, I have to do something. I have cancer now. I have prostate issues. I have health issues, and I need to change something. Why do we wait till something is screaming when we can prevent it along the way? Because when it's screaming, it's going to take more work. Because in Ayurveda, we understand that health is dynamic. It is not static. We don't automatically just start walking down the street and fall into a hole. We start walking down the street, we see a hole, we get to choose. Do I keep walking and fall in, or do I walk around it and navigate around it so that I don't fall in? And that's a different kind of process. So usually conditions develop over time and start in the most subtlest ways. And are we attuned to those subtleties and understanding, like, oh, I'm doing something that's creating something in the future. And in the future, when something does happen, I can't blame anyone. I can take responsibility for how many things I did that weren't correct for my physiology, for my mind, for my body. So understanding all this simultaneously as a conscious process. Ayurveda is about developing consciousness. Karya Karana is about cause and effect, which requires a level of awareness, which means if I'm feeling acidic today, what did I eat yesterday? What did I eat this morning? What was I doing? Was I staying up late last night? So sleep contributes so much to ill health or good health. So when we wake up in the morning, we wake up and we just greet the day. Do we greet the day? And I feel I might have mentioned this in other conversations in the past here. Do we wake up in the day and listen to that blaring, blasting, loud music? It's fascinating because when I wake up sometimes around 5:45, and there's that car that drives by and is blasting this really loud, obtrusive sound. Like, that's the last thing I want to hear first thing in the morning. I like the sounds of the birds, and I like the sound of the wind in the atmosphere, and I like the chimes that I have around my house that chime when the wind passes. And I like understanding, like, the natural sense of the morning before jumping on the news and jumping on TV and jumping on Facebook and jumping in my emails and jumping on my text messages. Like, automatically I'm waking up to the day and saturating it with overstimulation. So how's that going to set my nervous system for the day? So starting the morning gradually, but getting up when you feel that initial impulse of, like, I'm awake and okay, get up and start to brush your teeth and start doing your morning activities, in connecting with yourself and preparing for the day. And so understanding that will set the tone for the day. Daytime sleep is called diva swapna. So last week we talked about nighttime sleep, which is ratri jagarana, which is, you know, understanding nighttime sleep, and that if we stay up late, we increase inflammation and tendencies towards neurological issues, overstimulation of the nervous system, which can create depletion, dryness, etc. And daytime sleep is also an interesting consideration. So diva swapna, because there are several considerations that the classics of Ayurveda mentions, and it's a very long list, so I'm not going to really go into the entire list here, but I'll mention a few things that are acceptable or indications for daytime sleep. So, if you're a senior citizen, that's fine. If you're a baby or a child, that's fine. If you're a mom and you're pregnant, then that can be fine. If you're feeling debilitated or sick, if you have a sickness, then of course, because sleep is a restorative process and allows minimal stimulation externally so the body can focus on repairing itself and rejuvenating itself and healing itself. Let's see, other reasons for daytime sleep. In the summertime, and when it's excessively hot, it's not uncommon in a lot of cultures to take a siesta. Now, there's a difference between daytime rest and sleep and actually sleeping during the daytime, which again, this is applying towards people who have like normal schedules of waking up and going to bed at nighttime. Nurses and doctors and firemen and things like that, or anyone working overnight shifts. There are other considerations and other tidbits that are adjusted for those individuals that require that so they can still get some benefits. Maybe not 100% of the benefits, but some. So daytime sleep, Divasvapna, we're not meant to lay down in like a prone or supine position. There's a really beautiful shloka or saying in one of the classic texts from Shushruta, and he talks about how the heart is like a lotus, and so during the daytime, the heart opens up and lifts up towards the sun and towards the sky, and is opened. And then in the nighttime, it closes down and looks downward. And so the heart is similar. So, in the sense that when we wake up in the morning, the heart is opening and awakening and experiencing the day. The circulation begins, the lymphatic system is activated. All the systems start to get activated. And so, in that process, if we're going through the day open, and then we decide to sleep, which is like lay down in a supine prone position, then now we're forcing the closure of the heart. And so that starts to decrease metabolic functions. And so things that we were processing during the day do not get processed properly and start to accumulate and increase what's called in Ayurveda, it's kapha prakopa, which is an increase of kapha or the tendencies of heavy and cold and moist qualities in the body. And so then you'll notice that you'll sleep and then you wake up and then you kind of feel groggy. That's the general tendency. Grogginess, sluggishness. That's an indication that now we've shut the system down, we've decreased cardiovascular functioning, and we're reducing blood flow. And now it's going to take more energy, more work to stimulate the body, while midday we should have already been awakened. So which now will affect the nighttime sleep, because if you slept during the daytime, then how are you to expect to sleep at nighttime? So again, if you've slept during the daytime because of the indications of being a senior, a child, mom that's pregnant, it's hot outside, then we could understand how the possibility would be influencing in the health. So the best way to sleep during the daytime, if there is a need for any kind of rest, is in a seated position or semi-reclined, if that's the next level, but not laying down in any position. That doesn't cause the heart to close down. And I really love the analogy of the heart. And, I'm not sure where you can find the reference, but it's Shushruta Sharirasthana, chapter 4, Shloka 32, where it talks about this in detail as far as the heart analogy, which is really beautiful. So when you consider your heart's opening during the daytime and then it closes at nighttime, and you're in this ebb and flow of honoring the daily cycle, when you're in aligned, hi Jisha, when you're aligned with the day's rhythms, the circadian rhythm, then we understand in science, Western science and Eastern science, and Ayurvedic science and allopathic science, that when we're aligned with the circadian rhythms, there is an increased optimization of health. You know, going out to nature is a good way to reset the different systems, because now we're no longer desensitized. And I mean really being connected to nature. I don't mean going camping in the woods and bringing your charged up tablet to watch movies in a tent. That's not the same thing. When you're really connected to that fire at nighttime and listening to the nature sounds, and when you're connected to the earth, and you're experiencing the sky and the full ambiance of the stars and the contrast of the darkness of the sky and the moon and things like that, and the daytime sun rays and just the bird, like all this. Those are things that reset the five senses. So daytime sleep is not really indicated unless it's indicated for those specific instances. And then to do so, again, you would be mostly in a upright position, so that you don't allow the heart to decrease. And in doing so, you support health. And especially in the summertime, if you take that little power nap, the nap should be like 10, 15 minutes, maybe no more than 20 minutes, no more than a half hour, definitely not 45 minutes or an hour, unless there are significant health issues that require that level of rest. And again, still laying down completely is not ideal. Save that for the nighttime. So considering how important sleep is, when we get the proper rest, we generally get the proper feeling the next day of feeling energized, feeling inspired, feeling productive, feeling efficient, and we are going to also be eating properly. Because when we're waking up earlier, then we have a natural inclination to eating a little bit more in the morning if we really feel that natural urge. And then lunchtime, we'll feel that natural urge. And then dinner time, we'll feel that natural urge. And then knowing that we won't need to increase sweets or caffeinated products to compensate for the nighttime rest that we were deprived of by staying up late. And, essentially Ayurveda says you should be asleep by 10. you know, Getting ready for bed around 9, and asleep around 10. So, not so much 11, not so much 12, not so much 1. And, you can test this for yourself. Do an experiment. Spend at least 3 to 5 days going to bed at an earlier time, and then noticing how the body will adjust itself accordingly. Letting go of the premise that you should have exactly 8 hours sleep or 7 hours sleep or 6 hours sleep. Your body knows how much sleep it needs. In yogic tradition and yogic philosophy, there are some considerations that when we're sleeping properly, when we're even meditating more, spending time with less stimulation of the senses, and so meditation is a way of drawing in the senses and reducing the activities that the nervous system is influenced by from the five senses bringing in the information, then we don't need as much sleep. I remember learning a long time ago from a neurophysiologist that worked at the Himalayan Institute as a teacher of yoga and meditation. He had said, essentially, like some masters can just only need 2 hours sleep because the other 6 hours for the average person is because of the over activities that the mind and nervous system are engaged in. It takes that many hours to decompress before you get to that level of sleep. But when you're really in this constant state of meditation and constant level of connection to that state of consciousness, then you don't need as much sleep because you're not overstimulated. So, and then when you're processing the information during the day in a different way, then your body can process it in a different way at nighttime. So it doesn't require as much attention anymore. So, that's just food for thought. And it's not very common. Some people like to have 2 hours sleep, but that's not an organic process usually. The night owl process is also not an organic process. When people say, like, I'm the most creative, the most inspired after 10 or 11 at nighttime, and I'm a night owl, I would say to them that scientifically we know, and we can see from past history, that before the onset of electricity, most people were still going to bed not that long after sundown. You might have had a candle to read that book before bed, which helps induce deeper rest. As soon as electricity occurred, people were like, oh, we can stay up later now. But now we're going against the natural cycle of the body because now there's something illuminating, stimulating, keeping us up versus winding down the house and closing the lights and minimizing that level of exposure. And here's another experiment you could do as far as going to bed is, read a couple pages of a book to help you go to sleep around that 9, 10 o'clock slot. See how that influences your rest versus you're looking on some sort of electronic device. And we know the blue light has an influence on stimulating dopamine and other neurochemicals. And so that also stimulates us and prevents us from sleeping. Or if we do fall asleep anyways, notice what the qualities of the dreams are. Notice what the quality of sleep is. And you can see what that looks like the next day. And just do a comparison, So book, no book. Book, tablet. And then as far as people that are in the tendency of going to bed so late, I wouldn't say, well, if you're used to going to bed at 2, be in bed by 9, because those few hours is a huge shock to the system, and we don't want to do that either. In Ayurveda, we do things very meticulously, very scientifically, very methodologically. And so it's gradually come back to the ideal time, over a period of time, which will work for each person slightly different. So find what that rhythm is like, maybe 15 minutes earlier for a few days until you eventually make it there. Maybe an hour earlier. Like, you find whatever really works for you, but make that intention. Thanks, Rich. Make that intention of going to bed earlier by slowly weaning off of the tendency. Like with any kind of addiction. It's like you don't just go from full-fledged addiction to zero. Most often than not, you don't. Some people can do cold turkey, but it's not that common, and it's still some sort of stress, and some of it depends on willpower and things like that. But you gradually go in a direction of less and less and less until you're more in that optimal place. So anyway, I hope these tidbits were helpful. And I'm here in Philadelphia, and I love working with people one on one. And I have my practice here in Mount Airy. And the website that you can find my information on is www.stillpointayurveda.com. And I'll also leave that in the comment section here. And it's always great to connect with you all. And I hope you have an amazing day and amazing night's rest. And if there's anything I could do to help, I would love to be of service. And know that especially during COVID times, as things are as difficult as they are, I am willing to work with people with a bit of a discount on the sessions. And you can private message me for more details on that. And I look forward to hearing from you. And have a great, 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 great day.